for coming in.
Pleasure.
All right, quarter-on-quarter growth, negative 0.6%. Could we largely blame the strike in the platinum sector?
Absolutely. Out of the 10 industries that Stats SA looks at for value added, mining actually value added on a quarter-on-quarter basis there fell 24.7%. So it's a big deal there. And out of that 0.6% down that we see, actually mining contributed minus 1.3 to that. The other big contribution obviously was manufacturing, but it was the mining strike that really dragged that number down. Not only have we lost sort of 18 weeks of production, I've heard figures that something like 17 billion rand production that we've lost, but we've also lost something like 8 billion rand in wages. So people going out there, consumers going out there and actually spending that money in the economy, and that's why we've seen sort of that drag down this quarter.
We were always told that the strike will impact on economic growth, but I suppose this is the real reflection in the numbers, isn't it?
Absolutely, because we've been waiting for this for so long, and it's really reflected there. We've heard on the ground sort of what's going on around the platinum belt with different shops and things like that, but now all of a sudden we've got that number and we know. I mean, we saw earlier in mining figures also out, and we saw just when you look at platinum itself, I think that it was down something like 43% on a year-on-year basis. So that is a big thing, and obviously it's going to have knock-on effects as we go along. Like I've already spoken about the household consumption expenditure, but something like manufacturing will be affected. We know that platinum is used in catalytic converters, and those are used in cars, so we know that there we're going to see something coming through, maybe later, maybe sort of as a manufacturer, you might have a stockpile of platinum, but later we're going to see that slowly trickle through.
Let me ask you this, though. We see in the developed world slowly recovering. We see demand increasing. One would think that the demand on South Africa would increase as well, and we would be selling more of our goods. Why then are we not seeing any evidence of that? Is it because we sell platinum?
A whole host of things there. I mean, there are two reasons why we slowed down back in 2008, 2009, after that little period. One of them, obviously, was demand overseas for our goods wasn't that high. The other thing is that those little bits of goods that we could actually export to take those overseas, we were having strikes. Something like we couldn't get that ore out of the ground to actually export that particular ore. So I think there are two ways you can look at this. Yes, demand is higher. That's why we think growth this year is going to be slightly higher than last year. Last year, GDP growth was 1.9%. This year, we think slightly higher, maybe 2.1, because we think in the second half of the year, we might have some improvement because of that demand overseas. But so far, I mean, we're almost in June, and we had this 18-week strike. We're obviously going to see a big impact there on mining. Platinum, big part of our mining sector, and I think mining makes up something like 9.2% last year of our economy. So if you're going to see that dent there, it's like that little bit of ore that we could actually export because demand is high on the other side. We're not doing that at all.
Right. How does this figure talk to the interest rate decisions of the Reserve Bank in the coming months? What do they read into it?
Wow. I mean, we heard last week the governor just actually downgrading their forecast too of growth this year to about 2.1%. I mean, there are two things the Reserve Bank looks at. The one they look at is inflation, and we know now that that is above that 6% upper target range, and it's going to stay that way to probably about the middle of next year. The other thing you have to balance in this whole decision is also what's happening to growth. I mean, if growth is this weak and we're actually downgrading our growth forecast, it means that your room for interest rates going up is not that great. But I mean, we can also know that the governor was very clear, even at last week's meeting, that yes, we are in a rate hiking cycle. So they have to balance the two. They have to balance this inflation that's above 6, and they have to balance this weak growth. And I mean, as she said, rate hiking cycle, we are in an upward swing. But I mean, as Nedbank, we think, well, what are they going to do now? We saw that 50 basis points up in January, and we think maybe in the next few meetings, we might have about 2 of those meetings, about 25 basis points higher. Because, I mean, we also heard the governor say she wants to sort of front load the rates, so maybe it was that 50 basis points, and then maybe there might be sort of slower rates there, and it might be 25 basis points. We think about 2 of those in the next couple of meetings. But, I mean, we have to balance the two. You have to balance that high inflation that is above that 6% with the slow growth. And I mean, last week's decision to just hold was great because we also saw that the rand had actually really firmed since January, where it was sort of above 11 rand to the dollar, and since sort of the previous MPC meeting. So we've seen a whole host of things there, but it's something very, very difficult.
All right, the big jobs question. We see this issue being thrown about ahead of the elections. The new cabinet's been sworn in, a lot of emphasis on the so-called economic cluster. With an average growth that we're seeing at the moment in this country, we're still far away from the sort of labour-absorbing growth that we need to get at?
Absolutely. I mean, stats are thrown out there that we need to grow something like 5% to actually start making a dent into our 25% unemployment rate, and that's using the narrow definition of unemployment. I mean, if you had to use a wider definition of unemployment, we've got a higher unemployment rate there. So, I mean, we're nowhere near this. Forecast for this year as Nedbank, we think we're going to grow at 2%. Last year, we grew at, 1.9. The year before that, 2.6. We're nowhere near that 5% to actually start creating jobs. I think the big role for government right now is just to make the environment such that business actually wants to go out there and actually expand plant, and business actually wants to be confident. So we just need to see government just instilling that confidence in business just in general. I think that's what's needed at the moment, and confidence is not looking great.
All right, let's just end off with what we started off with, the platinum strike at the moment. I would imagine it will do growth very good if we do happen to see some sort of resolve in that platinum strike.
Absolutely.
As the months unfold.
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking for some resolution at sort of the second half of the year. I mean, it's affecting a lot of things. If you look at our exports, I mean, we have trade figures coming out on Friday.
That's right.
And I mean, we're seeing as Nedbank a deterioration in our trade deficit to about 12 billion from about 11.4. So we're seeing that come through. If we have some resolve there, I think a lot of things can improve there, because platinum is a big deal when it comes to our mining basket.
Busisiwe Radebe from Nedbank economist. Thanks indeed for your time.
Pleasure.
Now, the Reserve Bank's monthly leading